All right. Excuse me, still hydrated?
Still highlighted.
Highlighted. Oh yeah, the light's still behind me. Light's still behind me. Excuse me? I know. Beautiful. Finally a beautiful sunny evening. So thanks for coming out on such a beautiful sunny evening. Tonight, sort of not much of a shift actually. The topic tonight is ethics of the Metaverse. Now, in a way, this is the second half of the lecture, the ethics of Taoism and nature, because they are so closely linked, and I think you'll see why as we go forward. But ethics of the Metaverse, and this one is particularly going to be focused on what the Metaverse is and how it might or might not be influencing us, because it is a real question what exactly it is. So, for example, here's a quote that you'll see. Global spending in the Metaverse could reach $5 trillion by 2030, according to a new report from international consulting firm McKinsey & Company. So $5 trillion. So the U.S. economy is about $21 trillion. So the suggestion here is that by 2030, let's say the economy is $30 trillion, it would still be 15-20% of the U.S. economy, which seems like a ridiculous exaggeration, one must say. But who knows? Who knows? Maybe this is the future that's coming. But what exactly it is, this is the problem. And this is a quote from a tech watcher. He says, and that's the main problem with the Metaverse right now. The nuts and bolts aren't there. The fundamental technologies that would let people chat, own property, and do business across platforms and devices in a 3D virtual world have not been standardized in a way that makes it possible. To make it happen, it will take widely adopted communication protocols that don't exist and reinterpretation of intellectual and property law. So what several people in the field point to is basically, we don't know what it is and the technology isn't there and it's not developed yet. But the idea is, more or less, that a new virtual world will be created or is being created that you will interact with in 3D. 3D seems to be a key to almost all of this. For some reason, 3D is more than 2D, so that's better. 4D better than 3D, apparently. Right? Like this notion that, it'll be more quote-unquote natural if we interact in an environment that is 3D because our world is 3D. Our world is not 3D, a common misperception. We'll talk about this. But therefore, if we create a 3D world, then it would be more immersive, more involving, and people would love to do it and participate in it. And hey presto, $5 trillion worth of commerce. Isn't this grand? And the leading, of course, company here, or one of the leading companies, is Facebook. And they tip their hand a lot on what they mean by Metaverse, as opposed to what anybody else might mean. They actually changed their name to Meta in what right now is a widely mocked, but if it becomes a $5 trillion market, they will be widely applauded move. But currently it looks like a widely mocked move to name their company Meta. Meta builds technologies that help people connect, find communities, and grow businesses. We're moving beyond 2D, see, there it is, you got to move beyond 2D, 2D not enough, and into immersive experiences like virtual and augmented reality, helping create the next evolution of social technology. So this is the idea. We're going to create a technology, a social technology, connects people, bring them together in these immersive 3D interactive environments. Yay, what could possibly be wrong with this? Well, let us count the many ways. First, as I mentioned, one of the little teeny tiny snags that's so far holding up the development of the Metaverse, particularly into immersive augmented reality or virtual reality modes, is that people don't like it. And there's a very good reason why people do not like this. When you even with a 2D screen, you have this problem, but if you try to immerse people, if you try to say, look, you're in a new world, you have to appeal to their senses. Right now, our senses are primarily that are appealed to by technology is sight and sound. Now, of course, everybody says, we have 5 senses. This is nonsense. Nobody can agree on how many senses we have. We have at least 30. It's easy to say we have 30 senses. Nobody knows because it's definitional. When is this a different one, the same one? But we're 30 plus senses, no problem. What happens is in an immersive environment where only your vision and your sound is appealed to, your other 28 senses that give you a grounding and put you in your place and to give you a sense of being in a real place are either turned entirely off or baffled. A bunch of these, not all of them, but a bunch of them are called proprioceptors. Now, I love this term because it's an important one to remember when we think about senses, because we forget this kind of stuff. Because proprioception is mediated by proprioceptors, so these are actual sensors, mechanosensory neurons located within muscles, tendons, and joints. So our whole body is wired with all these sensors. They give us all this feedback all the time of where we are in the world, what's happening, how the world should feel to us, how we should feel interacting with us. The classic example is close your eyes, touch your nose. You'll almost never miss. The reason you won't miss is because your body does this amazing bunch of calculations all the time. First, it has a spatial awareness of where you are. It creates a 3D map of the space and stores it in short-term memory. If you live someplace, it stores it in long-term memory, but even in short-term memory. And it locates your body relative both to itself, which is why you can touch your nose with your eyes closed, and to the space around it. So if I close my eyes, I should be able to pick up this water bottle. Yeah, okay, good. I picked up the water bottle with my eyes closed, even though it's only been there for a few moments. But my mind's like, oh, it's right around there. But to do that, notice your body has to have all this feedback that says, oh, your arm is extending. How do you know your arm is extending? Even with your arms closed, even with your eyes closed, you know your arm is extending because there's a bunch of sensors throughout your entire body that are telling you things like, oh, there goes your arm. Oh, wait, here it comes back again. Oh, there goes your other arm, and it's back again, right? That's great. Think of how weird the world would be if we didn't know where our appendages were. This is why babies are so spectacularly fun. Right? They're like, whoa, look, a hand. Whoa, where is it? What's it doing? Where is it going? Right? Like they're so clearly have no idea what's going on because they're wiring up their proprioceptors. They have no notion that like their foot that they have in their mouth is theirs. Right? Like it's like wow, I got a foot. This is so great. And then later on they're like, whoa, it's attached to me. How cool is that? Right? This is the development of proprioception of your sense in space. But we have hunger. We have temperature, weight. Our body is always building expectations of how much something should weigh. And if something's much lighter or much heavier, we kind of freak out a little bit. Right? A friend of mine made a special carbon fiber paddleboard for doing one of these races, these crazy races we do, like to Alaska or whatever. And it was like 18 or 19 feet long and weighed like 4.5 pounds. And when you picked it up, it was less than a gallon of milk. And so when you picked it up, your entire body like freaked out. Because it's so big and doesn't weigh anything, relatively speaking. Like I said, 5 pounds. I think it was right around 5 or 6 pounds. Like you pick it up, and you're just like, you didn't know what to do. Your whole body kind of like, ugh. Like, whoa, that's weird. That's really weird. Big things weigh a lot more than small things, in theory. Unless they're carbon fiber paddleboards. And so one of the big problems you run into is the problem that you run into, for instance, with seasickness. Seasickness is a result of a conflict in the inner ear, speaking of senses, your inner ear, where the human balance mechanism resides and is caused by a vessel's erratic motion on the water. Inside the cabin of a rocking boat, for example, the inner ear detects a change in both up and down and side-to-side acceleration as one bobs along with the boat. But since the cabin moves the passenger, one's eyes register a relatively stable scene. Agitated by this perceptual incongruity, the brain responds with a cascade of stress-related hormones that can ultimately lead to nausea, vomiting, and vertigo. So our eyes are telling us one thing. One of our senses, just the inner ear, is telling us something different. And so our whole system goes, bah, and freaks out. If you've ever been seasick, it's horrible. It's horrible. And it just, you think you're going to die. But really the only thing that causes it is there's only two sensory problems. Your vision is not lining up with your inner ear. And like I said, you've got, 28 other senses. And just those two at war is enough to make you feel awful. Awful. So one of the big problems, particularly with VR, but also with AR, is when people put the headsets on, they get disoriented because a bunch of their proprioceptive senses, their sense of space, is not lining up with what they see. And so this makes you nauseous, actually. One of the big problems is a lot of people just throw up. But if you wear the headset for a while and get used to it, then what happens is when you take it off, you get nauseous. Because your body adjusted to the feedback it was getting and said, oh, okay, this is reality. Check, we're there. You take it off and it goes, whoa, now you're freaking us out again. Now, sickness is the largest version of this. But what it really does, and this is, by the way, true with 2D computer screens. We have this problem already. I see no reason why more immersive versions wouldn't just make this worse. Has the same but less intense effect. But what it does is it causes stress and anxiety. Because sitting very still, having your other senses turned off, seeing motion only in your very narrow frame of visual reference, as opposed, because you can see, by the way, you can see out about 200 degrees. It's blurry out here, and it gets more in focus as you come in. But if you think of the size of a TV screen, you're using about 30 or 40% of your visual field, and this actually throws off your body a little bit. And you get all these little disjunctures between your physical environment, your body, and what your primary sense of sight and sound is taking in, creates dis-ease. It actually generates anxiety. And if anybody's ever had to do like a Zoom meeting, you realize at the end of these meetings that they're absolutely exhausting. This is what everybody reported over the pandemic. They're like, oh my gosh, these meetings that, you're in a 45-minute meeting, it doesn't seem like you should be dying, but you feel like you're dying. And there's any number of reasons for this. One, you have to sit artificially still. Two, everyone is looking at you, or seems to be looking at you. Right now in this lecture, all of you are looking at me. I'm used to that. Most people are not used to everyone, or feeling like everyone is watching them. That's weird, and it unnerves people. Also, you can usually see yourself, which is also very weird. Self-consciousness is weird. And so you stack up these what seemingly small deviations from human comfort and what feels natural to us, and it creates increasing levels of anxiety, and over sustained periods of time, health-damaging anxiety. So this is one of the interesting questions about the metaverse. Now, it is very likely that we can be trained to become accustomed to this. But what we're really doing is shifting the anxiety from the world we get used to the world that you can quote unquote natural world. Right? Like, oh, now I'll feel anxiety not when I'm in an artificial world, but when I'm in the actual world, because I've trained all my body, all my sensory systems to become adjusted to this. So it's like if you've been on a boat for a long time, first you might get a little nauseous, you get seasick, but after a week or two, when you get back on shore, the shore is weirdly stable, right? And you still feel the ocean moving, right? You still feel that ocean going, because that motion has now been built into your senses. And when it stops, it takes you a while to adjust again. And so one of the ethical questions that will need to be asked, probably won't be, is should we retrain ourselves to feel natural in a world that is artificial at the expense of creating anxiety when we re-enter a world that is currently considered, quote unquote, natural or normal? To say a real physical world versus a digitally mediated world. That will be the question. This is what when the nature lecture, this is what Stanislav Lem was talking about. We don't choose how we interact with nature. We've evolved into it. We don't take nature as we want it. We get it as nature is. So it's not a choice about, oh no, we'll just naturally switch back and forth. Turns out that's probably not an option. We're not going to get that choice because there's such different environments and they'll affect our senses in so many different ways that we'll have to be trained up for one or the other to feel natural. So this will be an interesting experiment. Some people are convinced that VR may never take off for this very reason. That finally people just won't, they just can't do it. So it's been around for 25, 30 years, and it still hasn't taken off. So maybe that's true, but we'll see. Who knows? So this is one thing to keep in mind. It is not a neutral technology. It's a very fundamentally influential technology because it wants to retrain how we interact with the world. And anytime you do that, of course, this is a significant change in the pattern of living, and hence in our outlook on what is and is not ethical, how we should live, how we should spend our time, and so on. A second thing to consider in this new virtual world that we may or may not be entering, or the new metaverse, is who owns it? So this is one of those questions that, okay, so theoretically, there is no limit of digital land. Like, digital land is infinitely producible. But people are now making land, selling it as if it's scarce, which is fine. But what this means is, who creates the world? This is what Facebook or Meta wants to do. They want to create a virtual world, invite you to inhabit, and then sell it to you. This is a very good deal for someone. Probably not you. So this is the same trick, right? When my neighbor always said, I know we stole the land from the Indians, so why do I have to pay a mortgage? Right? This is that question, right? We didn't pay the Indians for the land, we just took it. So at what point did someone do the trick of converting something they had taken into a product that was legal to sell? That's the genius move, right? That's the great moment of innovation, of like, ooh, it's mine now, so I can sell it, yay! And then property rights, right? Now, so notice property rights exist after you take the land, not before you take the land, right? Take the land and then you go you rights. That's the key. You got to assert property rights at the right time. So this is part of the trick with creating a metaverse, is to say, well, who creates the property? Who owns it? Who gets to control it? There's no answer to these yet, right? As of yet, there's no answer. This is under construction, as it were. Many different models are competing to decide this. But how these are answered will tell you very, very much about the ethics that are coming. If you want to think about this at all, which you may not, but if you want to think about it at all, this is one question continually ask yourself if you see a news article or someone talks about it, is, who controls it? Is it a world where I can build anything I want, use some tools, make what I want, put it where I want? Or no, it's a world where things are sold, things are made scarce. Who controls this land? Who controls these new spaces? Under what circumstances? The McKinsey report is not estimating that there'll be a $5 trillion marketplace for the metaverse, because everything is going to be given away in a socialized, free, and group-loving economy. This is not what they're predicting, by the way. That does not generate $5 trillion. What generates $5 trillion is monopolizing, reselling, channeling, and controlling. That's pretty clear. We've run that experiment over and over again in many different ways. So this is another aspect of this, though. Who gets to participate? Right? If you need a $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 headset to be in the game, and a computer to drive it, and a high-speed internet, this changes the dynamics of Africa. Most of Africa, sorry, you can't play. Right? It's only 1,400,000,000 people. So, but these sorts of questions are going to have to be worked out. Who gets access? What can you do with that access? How can you interact with other people? And who controls all this? All these standards. Like I said, that's why the guy says these standards don't exist, but they'll have to be. One of the interesting things about the internet, it was a public protocol. It just says if we all agree to use the same protocol, then people can come on and do whatever they want for free. That was the magic of the internet. So people are like, oh yeah, I can use these tools to build whatever I want. Yeah, exactly. And I don't have to pay for them. Nope, just have to pay for the bandwidth. Great. What a deal. That doesn't seem to be the plan for most of the people participating in the world of the metaverse, but we'll see. We'll see. One of the problems is three-dimensional graphics calculation is hugely, hugely expensive, which means you need lots of power, which means it's going to cost money. Somebody's got to pay for it. Here we go. Something else no one has cracked yet. So you have the problems of our natural interactions with it on one level, just our physical processes and what that means to retrain our bodies. Then you have like all of the ethical problems that property creates, right? Like this is none of this is new, by the way. People are like, oh, brand new world. No, we've been running experiments on property ownership, redistribution of rights, intellectual property rights. This goes all the way back. We have many models for how you could do this. Not the ones that seem to be most popular with the companies right now are the only ones that could exist. For instance, you could create a world, by the way, and give everybody the equivalent of $1 million virtual dollars. It's all digital. This is not a problem. It could be done. Everybody gets 40 acres, a mule, and $1 million. Do whatever you want with them. You could do that world. People might like it. People might love it, but we'll see. We don't know. This is probably not, again, what's being designed and developed in every place. Some people are trying to do this. There are projects like, I think it's called Decentraland, which is trying to address some of this. But will it succeed? I don't know. But you can ask all the same questions. People say, oh, it's brand new technology. No. I mean, yes, maybe. But the ethical questions haven't changed. How do you distribute land? Who gets the resources? Who gets to access the resources? Who gets to design? How are laws made? How do laws get changed? Who gets to decide how they change the laws? Right? Should everybody who is a member of a community be able to vote on the rules of that community? Facebook says no. In case you're wondering, Google is not in favor of that. So some other projects maybe. But so far, not so much. This is not what they're talking about. Another set which you may be familiar with is the privacy issues. Many companies are trying to assure you that they are very concerned about your privacy. The best way to read this is they're very concerned about having the ability to sell your privacy. Because this is what they're doing. This is, people know, speaking of Facebook, is one of the worst offenders, but not the only one. We'll pick on them. It's easy to pick on them because they're evil. So one of the things that one of their executives who left the company and complained, she said that, look, one of our big ads that we sell is for young women who break up with their boyfriends. We know when this happens. They're incredibly emotional and psychologically vulnerable, and so you can prey on them with particular kinds of ads. And so we sell that product for a lot. And she thought that this was a bit reprehensible, perhaps. So think about that, right? They know enough about you to know when your boyfriend or girlfriend has dumped you, when you're having a hard time. In another famous case, they started sending ads to a family for baby diapers, all this baby stuff. And the dad got pissed up because his daughter was like 16 years old. And it turns out that she was pregnant. And only people that knew were her and her doctor. And apparently the marketing companies. Yeah, that was a bit horrifying. And it just goes on and on and on. So these sorts of privacy intrusions now extend that to a world in which you're inhabiting a faux reality. Where they want you to be, just work here and be in this, metaverse space for, 15, 16, 17 hours a day. And everything you're doing is being tracked, click by click. Eye tracking, this is a big popular one. Where do your eyes land? How long, what do they look at? How big are your pupils, by the way? This is one that's tracked because your pupils dilate and contract as you get excited, so they can tell if you're getting excited at looking at a certain product or anything like this, so we track your pupils. This is all, by the way, built into the existing headset that exists today, these sorts of technology. They have to track your pupils to know where you're looking inside the virtual world, but also conveniently it lets us know exactly what you're looking at and how you're responding to it. And then, of course, you can iterate. And so this creates this, shall we say, hard to manage opportunity to exploit people's privacy. It's not clear how one would ethically go about not exploiting this. I mean, the temptation would be so huge to benefit from people in this way. I mean, they're already doing it, by the way. So I can't even decide if it would be that much worse. It probably would be, because they can always make it worse. But it is really bad as it is today. And by the way, it doesn't even matter if you're not using technology and stuff. They've tracked this very, very clearly, that your friends take a picture of you and post it online. You're online. Your friends take a picture of you at your house, say you have a party, and they post the picture, like Google, for instance, in their Google, they have a Google Photos thing, harvests this, date and locations it, and builds a 3D environment of all the houses and internal. Right, so they build these models of not just outside of houses. We have Google Maps, that's sort of somewhat controversial, but they also do other data harvesting to make sure they can build 3D models of what's in your house, which is cool, I think, that's great. So how much worse can it get? I don't know. But this is another huge ethical conundrum, let us say, but probably pitfall that we will fall into if this comes to fruition, and accounts for probably about 2.5 trillion of that 5 trillion. To have this sort of individualized marketing data on a few hundred million people is incredibly valuable. So, by the way, if anybody's seen, Apple's running a campaign right now saying, we protect your privacy. You tell us what you want other companies, to know about you. They don't say, tell us if Apple gets to know about you. No, Apple knows everything about you. No, don't worry about that. Apple gets it all. They never give you the option of saying, no, I don't want Apple to know about me. This is a non-option. They're like, we're your friend, right? So if I'm your friend, if I'm your brother or your sister, your mother, father, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, you don't mind that I know about you. So what I want to do is project myself as the friend who's helping you protect your privacy. Which is, I love this move. It's so beautiful, right? This is, you can trust us. We're your friends, right? We're here for you. And so this existing ethical problem is simply multiplied until it hits $5 trillion, which is what the study tells us. So you have a physical one, and again, this is just an extension of the nature our lecture. Then you have this really question of the politics and ownership issues. Again, another huge ethical swamp. Then you have this just corporate use of individual spying, which is a whole nother big corporate swamp, which throws a pall, I would say, or at least a bunch of ethical questions over this entire concept. Having said that, though, I do want to make a comment here, and I think this is something that we get confused about, which is another reason I'm dubious on the metaverse, actually, is we already inhabit a 3D world constructed from human imagination. This is not a new thing. We're in it today. This barn did not grow on a tree. This is not a natural occurring thing. Humans found some materials, and somebody, a farmer, thought, man, I think we could build a barn. And we want a barn that has these sorts of ideas, can be used for these sorts of things. We have these materials available. We have these skills to build with. We'll build a barn. So I don't know how long ago this barn was built, probably 70 or 80 years ago. It's probably been rebuilt 6 times in the intervening years. Changed use, reconstructed, rebuilt, and then it was repurposed now for Finn River here, for the cidery, which is great. But its origination and every remodel, every human imagination. We live in a world that is largely, not exclusively, but largely constructed out of the human imagination. It's a 3D immersive environment. Very good vision depth, good depth of field. Haptic, it has really good, you can touch things. Haptic feedback is strong. Right? And so there's this curious notion coming on that, people want to inhabit a virtual 3D world that allows them to express their imagination. I'm like, yes, they do. And yes, they do now. So the question is not this world or a world of imagination. It's what are we losing from this world? What are we gaining from the other one? And I have no doubt, because the human imagination is phenomenal, they give a bunch of people the opportunity to create crazy stuff in 3D digital. They'll do beautiful things. They'll do amazing things. Give people tools, they'll build crazy, beautiful, wonderful, disturbing, human stuff. I mean, there's no doubt about that. So I'm not like prima facie opposed to this. But what we completely misunderstand so often, and particularly in the rhetoric around this, is the notion that we aren't doing that already. We are doing this. We do build the world we inhabit. But I think what happens is people look around the world they inhabit and they go, this is not how I want the world to be, which is perfectly reasonable. And then you go, okay, so rebuild it. Remake this barn is not serving the function that we want it to. Let's remake it. You can actually rebuild the world you inhabit now. I don't like the world I'm in. Remake parts of it. You can do this. The difference is you can't do it just how you want. You can't do that in the virtual world either, by the way, because you can't make things taste, for instance. People really like taste. We really do. You can't make things touch yet. Again, haptic. We don't have the sense. You can't make the proprioceptors happy. In fact, you actually make them unhappy. But you can do other things that you can't do in the real world. But is that a good trade? And so often we're like, oh, well, we have these limitations in the world. Well, that's the beauty. The beauty is not that you have challenges and limitations. It's that what you do with those challenges and limitations. And you see this all over the world. Oh, this place, I was just in Europe, and they have all the farms are ringed in all these beautiful stone walls. The reason they're ringed in beautiful stone walls is because you have to get the stones out of the field. And the most convenient thing to do is to build a big wall as close as possible because you don't want to drag them all over the place. And so you just build a wall around your field to get the rocks out of the field. So this is necessary, natural, and beautiful. And so it's not, it's this mix is also part of the joy. And too often, again, if I want to take money from you, if I want to exploit you for the data I can get from you, what I want to do is make the experience as easy as possible for you. Because any resistance I get will keep you from joining the world. So I want to make joining really, really easy. Make everything super simple. No challenge. But if there's no challenge, why is it worth doing? I always feel this way. If anybody's ever tried to use watercolors are evil. They're a force of evil put on the earth to torture people. Right? Who came up with this as an art? It's just wrong. You almost never see large watercolors because even professional artists are terrified of watercolors, right? They're like, oh, don't do a big one because you just know a matter of time before you mess up. But what a beautiful, amazing way to paint, a silly way, with these incredibly runny, hard to control, but somehow it just creates watercolors, right? There's no other way to get that feeling. You would never do this in a virtual world. It would frustrate people too endlessly. They'd be too upset. They would get, oh gosh, dog it, no, this doesn't work. Oh, that doesn't work. This doesn't work. Didn't messed up again. Right? No, make it easier. So make it more, so the feedback is easier, right? Easy, easy, easy. This is also a trap. This notion that we want things to be easy. We want things to be natural. Part of us does, part of us doesn't. Which part do you want appealed to? Right? This is one of the questions that needs to be asked. If you make everything incredibly simple for people, they always say this with education. Oh, education, they love technology. Use this technology, it'll make everybody easy for some. People can learn so easy. I'm like, why do we want people to learn easy? Why do we, do this and you can read fast. Why do you want to read fast? if the goal is to have so many words go through in front of your eyes, sure, that's doable. But if the goal is to learn, maybe it should be hard. Maybe it should be really hard. Sometimes don't we learn things from really, really hard lessons? I think we call this life, right? Anytime we think we know something, life is there to help us and teach us that that's right, we didn't know anything. Yeah, but sometimes, it's nice to learn things and go, oh, well, that was easy. I don't know how rewarding it is. If you play chess at all, which is an evil game, like watercolors, if you play opponents who are within a range around you. And the better you play, the better opponents you play. So you always lose at roughly the same rate. You just lose against better players. So playing chess is not about winning. Theoretically it's about winning, but it's not really about winning. It's about losing against increasingly good players. And I think I've always thought, yeah, and it gets harder and more challenging and more frustrating until you just give up. I think that's the plan. And at some level, people go, okay, I'm good enough because I just can't take it anymore, right? And that's the system. And I've always thought, as opposed to this notion of, oh, you want to win. Theoretically, you want to win. But if you win, they just put you against more difficult opponents, and then you stop winning. And you lose for a while, and then they put you against easier opponents, right? It's a great system if you want to keep people infinitely frustrated, but also challenged, and you feel accomplishment. If you win a game like, oh, I played well, I actually won, holy crap, that is so amazing. Probably just got lucky, but I'll take it, right? That's an entirely different approach to learning, to how you interact with other people. So to keep this in mind, that our world already is a world of imagination constructed by humans in a 3D format. It's only a very, very small fraction of it that can ever be reproduced in a digital world. That doesn't make it wrong. It's just important to remember that. And the final thing I want you to ponder is time. Simply put, we're mortal. Sorry about that, didn't invent the rules. We're mortal, and so the most precious thing we have, but probably the only precious thing we have, is our time. And the true ethical question for the metaverse or anything else, like coming to this lecture, thank you very much, is this worth it? What else could I do? Am I doing something so great here that it makes it worth not doing all that other stuff? That's the question. It's weirdly a question I think we rarely ask. I'm always terrified that people go, oh, the average TV viewership is whatever, 32 hours a week or something. It's some number that just frightens me when I hear it. And I go, yeah, maybe, as opposed to sitting and watching TV, maybe being in the metaverse is better. Could be. Maybe. I don't know. But that is really the question. Are they offering something so unique, so apparent, so compelling, and so much better than everything else that I'm willing to sacrifice some of my health? Again, this is not a choice. This is necessity. It will not appeal to enough of your senses to not make it slightly anxiety-producing. Either going in or coming out, or both. There's no choice. So it will be a slight health sacrifice. And then what am I gaining from that time? So maybe work will be increasingly in the metaverse. And so people go, well, I've got to go to work-ish, so instead of doing Zoom meetings, I'll do virtual 3D meetings. Maybe that's better. Same amount of time, maybe you get more done and it feels better. Could be not. One example that I know is being used today is for things like taking apart jet engines. So it turns out that getting a bunch of engineers that you're training into a room to take apart and put together a jet engine is incredibly expensive. And you can only do it one way and then take it apart and then put it back together, or put it together and take it back apart. And if somebody 3/4 of the way in goes, oh, wait a second, how about that step 500 pieces ago? They're like, no, we can't go back. because you just disassemble everything, reassemble everything. So now they have these virtual models that they use to put people in there so they can do this a bunch of times very quickly and then put them on the actual engine. This turns out to work great. Pilots, flight simulators are full 3D worlds now. I'm entirely in favor of this. Let's have them practice a lot before we put them in front of a plane full of people. This is a great idea. So again, it's not that this is all evil, all terrible, but these are the ethical considerations. And it's shocking to me, of course, because I'm just obsessed with this kind of stuff, how rarely these are the questions that people talk about. They all seem to talk about like, oh, is the headset comfortable? Does it weigh too much? How much does it cost? How much of a computer do I need? I'm like, okay, yeah, those are logistics, but how about some of these questions over here? They seem a lot more pressing. How does it affect our health? Negatively, by the way. What are the property laws? What are the intellectual property laws? What's the privacy issues that's going to be exploited here? Is marketing legal? Can I own something? How do I express my ownership? Will it hold up in court? What jurisdiction am I in? By the way, almost certainly these things will be built in like the Bahamas or in Sierra Leone or one of these nations that exist to give Cyprus. Right? Cyprus is one of the banking capitals of the world, not because they have a bunch of financially educated people there, right? Because it's a legal tax haven, of course. That they'll be based in some place like that, and you'll find out that, you have no rights, I would say. I would guess that, and I'm sure it's going to be true for many of these projects. So, those sorts of questions seem rarely to be asked, but I think it's worth asking. And one note to return to Facebook here. Notice that Meta builds technologies that help people connect, find communities, and grow businesses. Does technology help us connect? I'm really suspicious on that one. I can't remember the writer. I think it's D.H. Lawrence, but I can never assure it to him. I should look this quote up. But he said, they gave us the phone as cold comfort for the train that took our children away. And I've always thought, right. The reason you need the phone to call people is because you're not there anymore. But notice what they're offering you. This is the sales pitch. Community, friendship, come together. We're bringing people together. Always slightly suspicious of this. Are they really? Is this the kind of communities we need? Does technology help us in this way? Maybe yes. It's one of those big ethical considerations that I think we should think about. So, ethics of the metaverse. Stay tuned because there's going to be a lot more of this coming. This is where the early stages of this. So thank you very much.